Welcome, guys, to another fantastic episode of Unbranded Change, the Sound of Change podcast. We're very fortunate today. We've got two, not one, but two authors on board to chat with us about to go some hard journey of being an author. So maybe I'm wrong, but we'll find out from there. It's a hard one or if it's an easy one. So first up, we've got Stacey Fru. She's a multiple award-winning author. She's an inspirational speaker. She's a best-selling child author. She's a storyteller and a brand ambassador as well. So we've got many questions for Stacey. We hope that she's ready for that. But before we get into that, we're gonna just start with some words of wisdom, as we always do. And today, I'm just gonna take you guys on a bit of a journey to ancient times, to the ancient writers. So I'm gonna quote a gentleman by the name of Plato. So it's a simple quote. It goes as follows. So Plato mentions Thoth. So Thoth is a god of wisdom in writing and literature. So Plato mentions Thoth in one of his dialogues. He uses the myth of Thoth to demonstrate that writing leads to laziness and forgetfulness. And in the story, Thoth remarks that King Thamus of Egypt, so that writing is a wonderful substitute for memory. And Thamus remarks that it's a remedy for reminding, not remembering, with the appearance but not the reality of wisdom. And future generations will hear much about without being properly taught and will appear to be wise but not to be so. So I'm not sure if modern writers will agree with that composition or not, but it is what it is. So the first question then, we're just gonna jump straight onto it. And I just want us to drift away from. We're gonna get into it, but your books, Stacy, Smelly Cats, and right up to your latest book right now. But we're just gonna start with the issue of language. How do you guys deal with language when you're writing books? It's a clear battle between English and indigenous languages. So how do you tackle that in terms of, well, I'm writing in English, it's going to sell more, it's going to be marketable. But what about writing in indigenous languages? What's your take on that? We start with Stacey first.
Okay, thank you for that question. And I think it's very important because when I first wrote my first book titled Smiley Cats and went on to write more books, we got the books translated into I think three indigenous languages, which was Xhosa, isiZulu, and Sotho. However, we don't have enough funding to print the books in a large quantity within those languages. So that is a big reason why they are only available in English currently. But I also think it is very important to push our local languages within the community because it is part of our culture. It is part of who we are. I grew up, or I'm currently growing up in an English speaking home. So it's basically all I know, though I am learning African languages in school. But for South Africa, it is important that we preserve and teach and create things using the indigenous languages.
Zama Khubeka, you've written a book in English and isiZulu. What's your take on language?
Hi Stacy, by the way. I definitely agree with her as well. I think it is important to preserve African language, and I think that's why my books are both available in isiZulu and English because I am um, from an isiZulu speaking background, and I'm raising kids that I want to speak isiZulu and be fluent in African language, and of course in English. I think it's almost a bit obvious that they'll be fluent in English because that's the lingua franca of the whole world. I think most of the world, rather. But I've also done a Pictionary, which would help people like Stacy or anyone else who's interested in learning isiZulu or any other language, because the Pictionary then has words um, has pictures and words of things in both isiZulu and English. So then that was my aim in writing that, to ensure that as much as we preserve our language, we also are inclusive when we are preserving the language.
So Stacey, I've been doing some counting, and I'm not sure if I'm left behind right now. I've counted eight. You've written eight books so far. I'm not sure if that's correct, but in those eight books, are any of those in an indigenous language? And if not, do you intend to write a book future in an indigenous language?
Thank you for the question. I haven't written 8 books just yet. I'm currently working on publishing number 6 and then number 7 also within this year. So among those books, none of them are written in indigenous languages. As I stated earlier, they have been translated. The first book had been translated in 3, but it's a struggle to find funding to print those in large quantities. And I do hope to write a book in an indigenous language, something catered for younger kids, maybe. Something playful, something to help them, maybe with poetry and things like that. So I would be interested in doing something. Yeah.
Okay. Haley, it's over to you.
Thanks. So, Stacey, you spoke about for children wanting to incorporate poetry and stuff into your books. What do you think authors should strive to put into a good book that's really going to grasp the attention of children?
Thank you for the question, Mrs. Haley. I think that authors should put things that are both creative but intuitive towards children. So when you're writing a children's book, you want there to be something that they can learn from that they can grasp. Because when you're a child and you're reading these books, you are teaching yourself about the world around you and about, what's going to come or what you can use right now. So when authors are writing books, as do many children authors, there should always be a message behind what they are telling, and there should be some indication of how the child should use that message going forward.
Thank you so much. Zama, would you care to speak to that? Because I know that you also have written books inspired by your child learning from them.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think, again, I'm going to agree with Stacey that when you do write children's books, they has to have a message. I think with my books, the aim was to really encompass Ubuntu, even though the book is actually based on animals. It's the story about animals, but the underlying message is about, kindness and caring for one another. So I think whenever you write for children, make it fun, make it interesting, and make it short. It mustn't be too long, I think, especially if you're writing for young children like me. But have an underlying message that even as they get older, it stays with them.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that one. Bongani, would you like?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So Stacey, there's an issue we've been talking about with Zama on a previous episode, and which is when you're writing for kids, you get into a bit of a stumbling block, which is called attention spans. So how do you write with the intent to grab a child's attention span? And how do you decide on the length of your stories in your books?
So I think what's very important for me is that I started writing when I was a child. I wrote my first book when I was 7, published when I was 8. So when I was writing for children my age. So it was easier to know what I liked and what I thought my peers and my friends would like. So I went into that space writing for my age group, as do I with my books now. Currently, I'm planning on launching a novel, which is for particularly teenagers and up. So I feel that my writing evolves as I also grow older. But with children's books, how I think you can capture the attention span is to play on words. So try use words that rhyme with one another to make it more fun and make the children, more interested in what's happening. Also, use your imagination. Fiction, of course, is the best genre for children because it lets them play on what you have already written. Using characters, for example, myself, I use cats that could walk, talk, and lived human lives, so that intrigued children. So I think that for me would be a good way to capture a child's attention span. But based on the length of a book, I think it should be quite short, but you should take your time to finish your story. I don't think there should be a limit put on what you want to create. Thanks.
So you touched on something, and you talked about imagination. So there's another massive issue we're facing right now, which is a massive battle between screens and pages. I'm just gonna share a story right now. I'm gonna take you through a story by a gentleman, which is called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I'm sure you know the reference to that. And there's a scene whereby one of the kids, ITV, he gets eliminated purely due to the fact that he likes TV and stuff. So my question is, how then do you? Um, sorry, I forgot my. How do you then deal with that in terms of books versus pages? How do you sort that out? How do you um, entice the child to want to read the book instead of watching screens? Um, and you're also going to touch on Afro story on that as well. Um, Tell us more about that. And does it affect the battle between TVs and screens, or phones and reading on phones and reading on paper?
Yes. Okay, thank you so much for that question. I think that especially in this, digital age, a lot of children are using technology excessively. I have a younger brother at the age of 10, and he is on his phone playing games, watching YouTube, like almost 24/7. He'll fall asleep, with the phone in front of his face. And I think back to when I was 10 and I would fall asleep with a book in front of my face. So the contrast of what is happening, and I wasn't 10 long ago, 5 years ago. I was 10 years old. But all these changes that we have been put through, especially with the lockdown, that has forced people to resort to technology as means of communication, but also entertainment and things like that have, we've grown up our children, or our children grow up in this environment where they are exposed. And I think as parents, the best thing, or guardians, the best thing they can do for that is to limit your child's access. And I know that it's not going to be easy because you gave them access to these things anyway, but you have to introduce them to books that they find interesting, that they would like to read and want to read. And if your child is reluctant, then just have an evening session where you guys read together and you reflect and things like that. So just these little acts that can help your child resort to literature and learn and experience the wonders of grasping all these stories. And on Afro Story tries to incorporate both, much like Kindle, technology, and reading, which I think is absolutely great. It offers an offline selection, so you can download a book. It's mainly focused on African authors and African story to promote Africanity. So the Afro Story app was launched in 2020, and ever since then, it's gained, I think, about 10,000 users. We reached 10,000 this month. And it's just this online platform where we encourage African authors to submit their works, and then we encourage the users to read them, of course, and leave reviews and share that with friends and family. So I think incorporating the two is good, but it's also very dangerous because I know that when you are on your screen, you can get easily distracted, which is why I do like the hardcover opposed to a soft cover.
Okay, okay. Haley, on to you.
My question is about the writing process for future aspiring authors. Would you say it's best to stick to a schedule in terms of when you're writing, or just freestyle it? Like, which method have you found to be most efficient in your experience?
I think in my experience, I write better when there is a particular deadline. It forces me to be more creative, and I feel that I have a trouble just freestyle writing because I let other aspects of my life take over, such as school, extramurals, hobbies. So I think that when there's a deadline, I am forced to get into that space of writing. But when there is no deadline and I'm writing just for just, then I can write maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks. So I prefer having some sort of deadline there.
Okay, so you work better, you would say, under pressure.
Yes, definitely.
Miss Zama, could you add to that, please?
I'm different. I think I also have a lot going on. I think between I'm a mom and wife and I have a whole career. But I think because for me, writing is like a passion project. So I do as and when I have the inspiration but what I do like to finish and maybe the difference between me and Stacey is that she's now venturing into novels. I'm more into children's books, which would be like 20 to 40 pages max. So if I do get inspiration, I write it some way. Sometimes I can even type it on my phone or my laptop, um, just to put the bare bones of the story, the skeleton of the story. And then when I have time again, I then fill in the meat. So deadlines are probably are the better ways of doing it. But I think currently for me, for my inspiration to flow better, um, it's when I think of a story and it comes to me. The only thing is that whenever I get it, I have to just make sure that I jot something down so that I don't lose my whole process of the story. And then when I have time, then I'll flesh it out nicely. Thanks, Haley.
Thank you. So you said that when an idea comes to you, where would you say that inspiration comes from? And where do you think future aspiring authors should look for that inspiration?
I'm gonna, at the risk of sounding very cheesy, I'm gonna say they must look within. I think because I started reading at a young age, when I was about two. I think nature for me. So whenever I just get that quiet moment and I look at nature differently, and again, with reading and as well as with writing, it's a muscle. So the more you exercise it, the more you do it, I think you get better at it. And so sometimes I could be sitting outside and I get lost in my imagination, and then that's when I start seeing personalities in things like trees or birds, and that's where the inspiration comes from. So I think time alone, time away from the screen, like you guys, like Bongani and Stacey were talking about earlier. When you have that time where you're alone, with your thoughts, that could definitely drive inspiration or a situation that you could be facing. So looking within, for me, always works best.
I love that it's not cheesy at all. It's quite amazing, actually. Miss Stacy, you were also quite young when you wrote your first book. So where would you say that inspiration came from?
Oh, thank you for the question. The inspiration for me writing my first book stems from a whole story. So, what happened was that in 2014, my mother graduated with her master's, and 7-year-old me at the time had no idea that a thesis was something required for you to do in order for you to graduate. So when my mother had the graduation party, we went through all the footage and I kept on seeing everyone praise this particular book. Remember, I had no idea what a thesis was at the time. So then I put two and two together and came to the conclusion that my mother had written this book without telling me. And I became very frustrated and decided to spite her in writing my own book without telling her. So it was sort of this revenge kind of story, which pushed me into writing. And ever since then, I just haven't left.
I love that story. It's like the beauty of a child's mind, right? Like you never would have thought that you would have come so far, but it worked out like so amazingly.
Mm.
Yeah, that really speaks to the role models that we have in our life and how they shape us. You guys are both role models now, so do you have any suggestions or advice that would help one flourish as an author?
Uh, okay, so my advice to anyone who wants to venture into writing is to be free. Writing is not a space where we are limited by rules or laws and things like that. So use the space that you are given, use it wisely, express yourself. Do not limit yourself. Do not think you need to write a certain way and your work has to be, X, Y, and Z. So just use your space efficiently and effectively and do what feels right for you, but also to gather yourself a support system, especially if you want to become published. Then get yourself people who will stand behind you, who will encourage you, who will go out to book fairs with you and sell your books for, 4 hours. So just find the people that you work best with and find what works best with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Uh,
Zama.
well, Haley, I would say that yeah, I think writing, like I said, for me, I can only speak from my experience. I think writing is a passion project, so it has to be something that you enjoy, and I think um, if you enjoy it, then the ideas are going to come freely to you. And we all have books that we may like reading, but you don't have to sound like the author that you've read. So write your way, write a story that you know even you can relate to. I think outside the story, all your people in your environment can relate to. So very often, sometimes maybe when we read Europe-based books or American-based books, we think we need to also we need our stories to sound that way. But no, if you're coming from an African context, tell your stories in an African way. They will definitely be interesting and add value to someone out there. So right from the heart, I think that's super important because we all have, I think we all are like different colors of the rainbow, and we all really need to shine that bright color. And we have value to add. Tell your story just right from the heart. That's me. Thanks, Haley.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. We should draw from our own unique experiences. I just have one more question for you guys before I hand back over to Bongani. And it's what is one of the most surprising or important things that you have learned when writing your books?
I can go first. Thanks, Haley. I think for me is it wasn't when I was writing it, but it was after I'd written it. I think I was surprised because I just thought I was telling a very simple story that maybe 5 or 10 people are going to be interested in. But I think the response that I got from it, and just from from kids as well as the parents, was really amazing, and how they related to it. Like I said, I'd written a simple story about birds, and the fact that people were able to also unpack the hidden message, that was, I guess, a pleasant surprise for me because I thought it would take time for people to get that. So I think what I found with writing is that you write for yourself to release this thing that is in you, but um, how people receive it is always the best part or the best surprise that I got from my writing experience.
And to answer the question, I think the most important thing I've learned while writing is just how much I should appreciate the work that I produce, but also the work other people produce. So now when I read a novel, when I read a short story, I can sort of appreciate it more. And just the time and the effort that goes into all these things is extraordinary. And the most important thing writing has taught me would probably to, how would I say this? Value the people I have in my life. My parents play a very big role in who I am today. And I can see the hard work that they put in to make me who I am. So I take that on with me everywhere I go.
Thank you so much. That's the end of my questions. Before I hand over to Bangani, I just wanted to say, like, it's so inspiring to me also because I have been looking into writing children's books. So you guys have answered my questions so amazingly. I feel like really filled by that. Thank you so much, Bongani.
Yeah, thanks. Stacey, I'm just gonna take you back to Smelly Cats. I'm gonna ask you what the story is about. Is it about smelly cats and what else? And the key message that young ones can grasp from that. Yeah, and out of the books you've written, is it the most successful so far?
Thank you for the question. So, Smelly Cats is about two cats called Mark and Mac who are cousins. They grew up as cousins, they're in the same grade, same school. And the whole idea of this book is that it teaches kids that conflict between families, though it can lead to a lot of emotions, a lot of drastic events, a lot of stress, can be resolved and can be resolved in a way that unites families and creates a stronger bond. So the Caps, Mark and Mac, they go through some stuff together and they leave, going or coming out of this space with a stronger bond, feeling as though they are brothers. And I would say Smiley Cats is my most successful book, and it's also my favorite book out of the five so far, mostly because it's the first one and it just brings me back to when I was actually writing the book and I didn't see what was going to come ahead. So Smiley Cats is my favorite. It is also the only book of mine which is used for early child development under the Department of Education here in Johannesburg. And yeah, I just think it's sentimental for me.
All right, and if you were to look at all your books from Smelly Cats up until today, do you notice any difference in the style of writing and what influences your story, the kind of messaging that sort of changes and morphs over the duration since what 2014 when you were seven? So what's the difference there?
I think the main difference is my maturity and the fact that I now when I write for someone like me. I use a more expanded vocabulary and I'm improving, on my spelling and grammar ever since I was 7. But also, I think the message changes as I learn more things about the world. So, for example, my fifth book, my most recent book, Where's Tammy, that tackles issues of child abduction, child trafficking, safety and security, which are also issues that align with my foundation. So when I wrote the book, I was writing for more towards an educational purpose in mind. So I think the message differs on what I feel strongly about with that moment.
So we're gonna touch on a question, and we're gonna get to the foundation and your the campaign against the elimination of child labor. But it's about dreams actually, and the fact that we dream a lot as kids, but over time that fades away. It becomes a fantasy. So how do we keep our dreams all throughout our lives when we obviously we face challenges, a lot of challenges, and when we measure our dreams against reality,
Mm.
when we're facing systems, when we're facing sort of setbacks and failures, we then give up. It's easy to give up.
Yeah. Okay. I think I hear you now. You're
So,
saying how we keep our dreams alive. Um, so I think your dreams, funny enough, will haunt you over time. Because, like I said, I liked reading from a young age, and I only published my book when I was 29. So we're now built a whole career and gotten married, and I was about to have a kid. And I really put writing in the back burner. but I never forgot about it. And so I think your dreams and your ambitions and what your purpose is will continue to stay with you. And I think whether it's the younger generation and to other parents, and even what I'll do with my own daughter, and I think what Stacey's parents have done with her as well, is that the child has a dream, help them explore it and pursue it to the fullest. I know sometimes with age we lose interest in certain things, which is fine because sometimes that's what growth requires us to do. Sometimes you can like soccer as a kid, but when you get older, you lose interest in it. It's normal. We evolve as people, but I would definitely encourage parents and even just young people. I think Haley said she's passionate about writing. Just explore whatever dream you have to the fullest. If you reach a roadblock, keep pushing and pursue it as much as possible. And unless you feel that it gets to a point where it no longer fulfills you, then you can walk away. But I would definitely encourage people to always follow your dream. That's me. Thanks, Bongani.